quick here. So, the idea that we're going to go over is the dangers of popping bubbles. Why Charlie Kirk and so many others in politics and media are so influential. It says 40 minutes to an hour, but I'm just going to read what I even got written down. So, preface using current events as the reference. Start off, even if that is the case that Tyler's beliefs fell in line with the beliefs that the left followed due to their experiences growing up. The story then probably goes kid grows up Republican, with Charlie Kirk's messaging and beliefs aligning to the right, then goes to college or goes to the internet. Check out the video that I just posted prior to this. But rooms with someone that's trans truly sees that Charlie was on some fuck shit, taking his words extra literally, even though words do have meaning, ends up taking issues too far into his own hands after realizing the reality that trans people are simply people, but due to the hate constantly being spewed from the right, and from his experiences with his family's beliefs and practices reflected that hate in the worst way possible. Nothing to do with indoctrination per se, in the intentional sense, as is clearly what's being implied and even explicitly said by those holding positions of authority and leadership roles within the government, and those who collectively have the most wealth in both the country and compared to any single individual in the world. I'm talking about Elon, because, I mean, we see what people are posting. It's not that fucking difficult. So, it's what's difficult is what you figuring out what you really believe in. Anyways, that is the problem, especially with the amount of uneducated, ignorant, and dumb people that exist. That's a fact that simply needs to be called out for what it is, and honestly, it's okay to be dumb to an extent. We are all humans. We are all individually don't know or understand things for what they really are because our perspectives are truly limited and easily influenced. As I show by having my one and only video to pop off for all the wrong reasons, being the one calling out stupidity and sheer irresponsibility of ignorance. The I'll put a card up. It's the Asmongold is fucking retarded. So as long as I can call people out for their stupidity, is for whatever reason, as long as that isn't going to get considered as hate speech now, calling someone friggin' stupid, but we don't even know, which is the concern, which is what's scary, is the unknown. But sticking to this, as I've stated that bad publicity is good publicity, mind you, in my Existentialism 101 video, I acknowledge that sort of effect exists and use the algorithm how it's designed. Like, that's why it popped off so big, because it was a short 15-minute video that mentioned of someone that was very on top and they just made a controversial comment. So, that video is easily one that shows a lot of examples of how ignorance plays a role in judgment because of ego, while the other longer and more detailed videos go over the claims in the video, as I said that I was going to do, with all the attention, right? Or, I mean, the longer videos, clearly no one even took the time to look and to listen. I even said I was going to do it afterwards. I did. The video is there called Dispelling the Rhetoric, but I don't think anyone took the time to look at it, as that video has been posted the same day as the Asmongold one, which shows more examples reflecting the sheer ignorance and ego of those within the bubble that I pressured. I get an hour long is too long, so we'll go over it all here real quick. This is why it's important to have professional, empathetic, knowledgeable, and responsible leadership now more than ever. Unfortunately, we can see everything unfold for ourselves. All we can do is sit back and hope we'll make it out the other end alive, preserve what we got left, and remember the significance of being human, existence, preserving existence, doing the right thing. Like, the same shit that was in the New Testament, the same shit that's been taught in all sorts of different religions in some way, shape, or form, both collectively and individually. And you don't even have to be religious to respect existence. You just have to understand that, treat others the way you want to be treated. It's the golden rule. That's why it's called the golden rule. And clearly that's just been thrown out the window. So it's wild that they can say that there's no real response from the left when it comes to grievances and everything else, because this is awful. I've been saying this is awful. Many other people have been saying it's awful. It's awful for many, many friggin' reasons. And we point them out, and no one seems to give a shit. Because their audience is so delusionally caught in their bubble that they'll never see what the other side posts unless they actually go out and search for it. This video might even be an example of that. So unfortunately, it has to do with someone taking the bait for the hate view for so long that it made it so easy for them to decide to do something like that once they felt betrayed. Same thing happened with the Penn Butler assassin, you know, the offender, the person that did what he did because, as he believed, the people on both sides weren't radical enough. As we've seen, he wasn't. We know that didn't really have left-wing beliefs, or more so right-wing beliefs, and radically crazy, as we see when reports take into account political violence on both sides. We see what they take into consideration. That's just how it is. And people don't seem to recognize that as they slip further and further on one side of the pendulum. So, if this is truly the case, especially as we see the roommate doing the right thing, and the roommate being trans, so if anything, that should be a sense of redemption, but clearly no one gives a fuck, because they haven't been arrested. Someone that is trans is doing the right thing and involving themselves with the authorities while they have some of the worst people in charge right now. That shows more than anything how dangerous the rhetoric from the right has been to everyone, because hate breeds hate. It's as simple as that. And we see the ones who are actually condoning all of this being the ones on the left as per usual. Not condoning, but like condemning it, I should say. So that was a human slip on my part. And that's okay. We take the time to recognize that shit, right? It's called self-reflection. So, while only some, at least on the right, are condemning this as well. You know? It's ridiculous. I can see the radicalization is partly due to this dude being raised in the blood and weapon culture, per se. Maybe there was some, obviously be careful, some weapon safety involved. But, I mean, once you gain that sort of confidence to do something so fucking stupid, as we see in society and like on reality TV shows and shit, people are willing to do the dumbest friggin' shit so easily without any actual pressure. And this is me pressuring at least the political spectrum itself by just throwing these facts out there, not as like a centrist, not as any, just fuck the labels, man. I'm a human being, just like you, just like everyone else in your life. And that's what we need to get back to. So, as soon as he stepped out into the outside world, away from that family life, that culture that he was brought up in, saw that things weren't adding up like they always said they were, then all that hate being taught just gets thrown right at the one spewing the rhetoric. It's just like when you're told to believe something all your life, and then it's a giant betrayal. It's like you're being told that Santa Claus is the one getting you all those gifts, and it turns out, no, it's not, it's your parents, and then you feel some sort of way. You feel betrayed, and you might get angry at your parents, or hopefully you don't do anything this friggin' ridiculous. So I'm sure in human history, someone's done that friggin' ridiculous at some point in time in the 90s or before then. Just in jest, but still, it's... And also the other thing, too, is these type of events did slow down to a point up until last year, right? And that's when you look at the statistics and stuff, you see that. But even then, still, the last 5 years compared to the last 50 is, I mean, the percentage difference in political ideology is the same. It's typically right wing people that commit these sorts of acts with that ideology in mind, then left. That's just how it is. But the frequency of that happening is a lot less. And it also depends on what stats you're looking at. But what you do is you look at more than just one, you start comparing. And you start trying to derive the truth from comparing sources. It's the whole point of debate. That's what I mean, I would hope Charlie actually believed in when he debated people, is instead of just, having people say things and then trying to get an own out of them or saying the insane things that he was saying, which both sides, whatever. I mean, like I said earlier, words have meaning. So when all that rhetoric, when you're taught to believe that sort of way and then you experience what that other side is actually like, and you're like, holy shit, like your experiences, your lived experiences are going to trump your perceived ones at that point in time because it's totally different than what you've believed in, and which is totally mental and genuinely would have been better if this dude argued Charlie. Obviously, he went up to debate him with some actual points and shit and took more time to understand existence and the preservation of it. But obviously, it seemed like no one was there to even introduce him to that idea. Because if, for instance, and for example, before I get to this next part, if people are constantly spewing that this group of people shouldn't exist, they're a sin to society, they're demonstrable, they're demons, they're satanic creatures, whatever, right? They say that all this crime and violence is because of people of this race or this color, or that certain leaders of certain political groups need to experience the death penalty. And just the words have meaning. That is just a fact. There's should be an understanding of freedom of speech, which clearly there was none in this instance. There was no respect for it, there was no regard for communal debate. But it's at the same time, it's all you're hearing is this sort of hate from one side, and then the other side is like, well, if they're saying that, then why are we going to give a shit about their existence? If they don't care about our existence, why should we care about them? It doesn't mean you're necessarily telling them, like, oh, like, they should go, like, not exist anymore. You just ignore them. That ignorance works both sides, unless you understand how the golden rule actually works, which is you treat others the way you want to be treated. And I mean, typically, the only amendment to that rule is treat others the way they treat you. And that's honestly a fundamental principle of self-defense. And even when you look at it, when someone's put into a situation where, especially when radicalization does end up occurring, typically they're in situations where they don't have many other options that just seem valid to them. And that's the problem. America's supposed to be whole freedom of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. We should have the liberty to have debates, to have speech, to actually be able to change each other's minds, to be able to take the time to do things. But when that blatant ignorance is so strong to a point where that doesn't do anything, it doesn't seem like it's doing anything at all, the divisiveness gets worse and worse and worse, the demonization gets worse and worse and worse on both sides. And even when one side stops, the pendulum keeps swinging, man. It's still swinging. It doesn't just instantly stop when one side stops. It hits them like a brick, right? That's just how it works. It's just like when you corner a fox or any other like type of animal, and all they're left to do is to use what they can to survive. When people keep saying that you shouldn't exist because you're different, what do you what can you expect at that point? I mean, you're either expecting them to not exist, and that's either going to be by your own hands or something else, because you can't control what other people think. And if you think you can by doing things like this, you're going to be end up doing it in the worst way possible, and you're going to receive back the same kind of violence, the same kind of put down. And that's what's being facilitated here, and that's what's being allowed, especially with this administration to some extent, as they keep saying these things and then they keep putting control in certain aspects. It's very divisive and it's very dangerous, and that needs to be understood, because by the end of the day, these tech companies, in the ignorance of the effect of their algorithms, right? Because of the bubbles that everyone is kind of stuck in. Because unless me putting out these videos and pressuring you to question this shit, or at least like making you interact, You know, that's a start, whether you like it or not. And I try to, at least, in my personal life, facilitate like some moral understanding and boundaries, right? As well as like when I talk to people, it's just like try to be that optimistic. And even as of recently, I'm not sensing that much optimism from a lot of people out there. And it's sad. It's screwed up. People want to react to this in some sort of way instead of taking the time to understand what happened and to be able to communicate and talk, because the more and more that we try to talk and the more that it doesn't work, the more likely people try other things, instead of condoning it, which was what prior administrations did all the time. And you can try to debate that as much as you want. You can try to, like, I don't know, fool yourself into continuing to believe the bullshit. But the truth is, because of these algorithms feeding you that information, and it's not like most of these companies know, they don't care. You're getting your dopamine hits, you're getting the information that you're already looking into, you're getting reinforcement because of these algorithms constantly showing you things that are just like that. Because until you decide to go look at someone else's perspective to change that algorithm up, it's not going to change. That is just how it works fundamentally. And people don't seem to realize that as well as they go onto social media. And this is why we have social media psychosis, or people getting delusional or quote unquote radicalized in this sense, because it builds exponentially to what they're already hearing on the outside through all these other channels, through their family, through other things, through their environment and what they experience. So, because of that, it's a feedback loop, and that we can see is getting exponentially worse. Almost as though they're getting to a point where the next J6 will happen in every city and state next. Which that's a scary thought, but with how reminiscent this is of 2020 and building up to January 6th, to an extent, the response is very similar. If not even, it's just getting driven harder now. And that's what's scary about it. It's scary how irresponsible and ignorant these government officials are, and unfortunately, it's the people's fault for voting this new radical Republican Party into the government in the first place over the last 10, 15 years. And you can say it, but it's like, you look back at the Bush era, if you grew up then. If you didn't grow up then you're not going to know. That's the other thing, too, or if you weren't taught that in school, and like recent history and stuff like that, or depending on your experiences, you might not ever really understand that, and this is your new normal. This is why we see this sort of change in the Republican Party, and why it's not the Republican Party anymore, it's the MAGA Party. That's been the plan kind of all along to an extent. And without proper debate, without actually calling these people out for who they are as ignorant and dumb, because they don't really know what's good for you. Look at the economy. Go look at Infonomics. He's a let's see, Infonomics. Probably spelling that wrong, but see if it pops up. No, it's right here. Infonomics. Like, political stuff and what opinions are on both sides is not the only thing I pay attention to. I pay attention to how the economy goes because I want to know how I'm going to have to spend my money, right? How I'm going to prolong me and my family's survival. So go check them out. As just something to understand the shape of the economy right now, because he's away from the whole political thing. He's just saying what the statistics are. Okay? But back to what we were going over. It's scary how irresponsible things are, and it's the people's fault for falling for that. It's, hopefully we the people can ensure things don't get worse by educating those stuck under their spell. That is the only way. You have to, like Saros TV says, you have to go after the ideology, not the people. Right? You have to actually make a valid argument to the people that are still here, whether they want to listen or not. You have to at least take the time to help them take the time to understand. It's the best thing you can do, and violence is not going to do that. That just adds more force to the pendulum. So, after all, the less of us that exist, the more money they'll all get to hold on to. And this is referring to, the wealthy just playing games with our societies now, in a sense, because we see what the wealthy say. We see who they're getting along with, and they're treating all of us like pawns in such a way. And this has always been the thing. We see what happened in Nepal, right? And then you also see what the censorship that's going on right now too, which is what is my next point. But treating all of us like pawns while they're constantly and continually flinging and spreading extreme rhetoric. Because the people that are making the billions right now, it's people that are involved with the US government and other governments as well. That's always been the case. And it's just a consolidation of wealth through and through, no matter how much is printed. And it's insane. It's like Elon Musk doesn't need all that money to survive. It's ridiculous. It destroys the whole monetary system in and of itself to a point where, who's even profiting anymore? Who? It's insane. So they're doing this with their influence, knowingly, unempathetically, carelessly saying what they are saying, right? And again, the less of us that exist, the more money they all get to hold on to. There's less opportunities for anyone else, more opportunities for them to experience whatever's in front of humanity. That's all that really matters to them, anyways. Especially now that they can just replace us with robots at this point. Unfortunately, that's what happened in Nepal, right? And it's not the robots part, but the whole that generation understanding the control and censorship that was keeping them under, in which is how the rich kept putting them down, destroying those with less than them. They ended up having the police open fire on a shit ton of them. It was awful. They clearly didn't give a shit about their existence. And what happens, like I said, when you corner someone and they're only left with so many options? What happened in Nepal happened. Granted, with America, fortunately for Nepal, though, the revolution only went on for a short time, much shorter than the American Revolution. If people forget that the American colonists revolted for very similar and analogous reasons as listening to the Declaration of Independence, go read it while you still can. Seriously. It's no trolling, none of that bullshit. There's a reason why history exists. There's a reason why it's important to understand how quickly people seem to just forget about things and move on to the next thing and just cling on to it without recognizing the historical patterns of cause and effect. So, the only thing is the two main differences I see with the Nepal happening in America. One is the indoctrination of individuals into military and policing roles, like we see with, money, right? Getting a $50,000 bonus means a lot more to someone going in the customs and borders than signing on to be a police officer and not getting a $50,000 bonus, right? You see the struggles there because it's taking away power from the states by the end of the day, because the states is what runs the police force, while the government is what runs ICE, Customs and Borders, and as well as the military. And we see what's been going on as well within each of these organizations, whether it's the FBI or the military and everything else. Especially people getting fired for just what they believe in. The quote-unquote meritocracy isn't really a meritocracy. It's only a meritocracy as long as you believe in what they believe in. That's not a meritocracy, that's an idiocracy. It's based off ideology, not what you've accomplished, not what you've actually done. It's who you know and what you believe in. That's not how you run society. That's how you destroy one. And I don't want to sound inflammatory, but you gotta call stupid shit is for what it is. It's stupid. It's so counterintuitive, and it feels like the meaning of a lot of these words have been lost over time, and people get desensitized. But like I said, number one reason why the USA is not going to end up like Nepal is the indoctrination of, again, military and policing roles. alongside the much more advanced weaponry available to the US military, and as well as surveillance and everything else. And there's no, like I said, there's no point in violence. But this is also a rabbit hole that you just have to be very careful of. And while we have the time now to have debate, to have speech, if we can do that, depending on what this administration decides to do next with their definitions and how they see things. But that's point number one. Number two, too many people on both sides. This is the divisiveness of the country itself. With Nepal, you had a 99% of the people on one side, just through and through, regardless. Or, well, actually, maybe actually about 99%. I don't know what the percentage population difference was for poverty versus wealthy, but you know. But the fact is that we have too many people. It doesn't matter what your wealth gap is here. They're just against each other because of this ideological feedback loop, right? That's been developed over the last decade and a half. That's what makes it scary. Is, you know, things are not going to be able to end up like that. They're going to end up drastically different if they do get worse. And honestly, that just depends on who's in charge and who's making the calls to do things. So, and hopefully they decide to do the right thing, or I don't know. It's just to at least have due process, follow through. They still have people in the government that follow the Constitution, follow the words and the definitions and the meanings of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, as this country was the basis for, as a democratic republic and not just a republic. So seeing the state of the country and of the Republican Party change so radically over the years, that's what's scary. And unfortunately, it certainly has to do with those that have a hold on the majority of wealth, just like Nepal, just like the American colonies, as all the grievances listed in the Declaration of Independence are very analogous to the situations and the state of things that we see today. Go look it up for yourself. Go read it and go see if, well, maybe the oligarchy is here. Maybe there is a lot of money in politics. Maybe there are issues with migration and classification of people's citizenship status. Maybe, yeah, you get it. Go check it out. But this is just making it easier for them to ideologically control the military so they can defy the Constitution with no consequences, which is truly scary, just making that connection and considering the tools and firepower they have access to. This doesn't mean to go out and do anything, because you're not going to win. There is no point. You're not going to win, and besides, it's not the right thing to do. The only way that you're going to be able to change things is to do the right thing, to show people, to live by example as a role model, by doing the right thing in respects to existence, to respect the existence of others because we're all human. That's unfortunately a side effect of the sheer ignorance, though, of the case of the right in this case, as when we go back to looking at what happened with Charlie Kirk. And mind you, this person was registered unaffiliated. They didn't vote. They didn't really participate in the political process. They just didn't like how people in the political space were saying things, which doesn't excuse this, but still, it's important to recognize it. Because if you don't recognize it and you just go off of what certain people say, when they don't even have information or an actual understanding for why things happen the way they do, because this finger pointing happened as soon as it happened, like the incident happened. No one knew anything when it was just nothing but chaos. They didn't even know if this person was white. They didn't know if this person was a cis male or anything. So, you know, that's the danger. And that's what needs to be recognized and called out for what it is, that it's stupid and ignorant to jump to those sort of conclusions. And it's important to take time to look at things as they are, as they develop. You know, there's a reason why there's due process. So that's basically it. But I mean, I'll link important documents in the thing, and yeah, we'll keep it short. So if you like it, then yay. If not, then boo. Check it out. Go like, sub. Look out for more content. Maybe I'll add cards to this, maybe not. we'll see. But until then, be safe out there. Just live life day by day. Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, make sure that they're not doing anything crazy. All right. Make sure that if you are politically active, do it in a proper way, proper presentation, especially as the rules keep changing for how people are even going to be able to speak at this point. So, who knows? Who knows, man? But just keep paying attention and be safe out there. Peace.